Hello and welcome. My name is Janelle Abela, and I'm the Principal Consultant with Diverse Solutions Strategy Firm. And today, we will be learning together about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the forestry industry. Thank you for joining me. Please join me in acknowledging the land that we learn upon today. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples. We welcome all attendees, but would like to recognize the region of Toronto specifically as a hub for the Women in Forestry event. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Before we delve into the diversity, equity, and inclusion application within the forestry industry, it is important to draw upon the definition of each of these terms. Diversity can be broken down into the who and the what. Primarily, we address the unique backgrounds, personalities, experiences, and beliefs of those who we are quantifying. As well, diversity is what makes us who we are. These are the identity classifications that make up our individual intersectionality and the statistical quantification of who a person is in terms of the who and what. After acknowledging the who and what addressed within diversity, it is important to take consideration of the how, which is equity, the being fair and impartial action towards one person or a group of people, justice according to natural law or right, free from bias or favoritism. This is the method that we are using to provide fair and equal treatment to all people of all classifications and identities within diversity. Beyond the quantification of the individual within the diversity of the who and the what, and the how addressed through equity, we must take a step further and look at the how through inclusion. Inclusion is being respected and appreciated as a valued member of the community or workplace culture. Representation of identity attributes are evidenced through practice, increasing the quality of the culture and workplace climate. This is beyond the statistical representation of diversity and the who and the what, and towards practical application of that diversity to enrich the workplace and enrich our society, recognizing the plentiful contributions that each aspect of diversity has. Now, with a stronger understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can take a look at the forestry industry through an overview of the current industry standards and practices. The forestry industry is currently experiencing a period of exponential growth, with nearly 750,000 people being employed directly and indirectly by the forestry industry. As well, advancements in engineered wood products are increasing the demand in products and exponentially influencing industry growth. Further, Canadian companies are competing in global markets, making international competitors a critical consideration for a company's competitive edge. With this transformation of the industry and exponential growth, we see a necessity for positive change within the industry's practices. As the forestry industry continues to grow, there's going to be a transformation of sectors, increasing the presence of STEM positions, as well as higher technical skills with more diverse backgrounds. There will be an increased presence in the sustainability sector, drawing new talent, which will increase opportunities for thousands of jobs opening in the next 10 years. These new positions will include engineers, skills trades positions, mill and woodlands operators, and administration. With attention to the new changes occurring in the forestry industry, it is important to address the current demographics of the industry. Newcomer and recent immigrants account for 12% of currently employed people within the forestry industry. Indigenous peoples account for 7% of currently employed peoples in the forestry industry, and Black people account for less than 5% of currently employed people in the forestry industry. While these numbers are currently low, with new projections and growth of the industry, it is expected that these categorizations of demographics will rise within the forestry sector. Despite positivity through growth and demographic change and heightened projections of success for the forestry industry, there still remains a negative perception towards the industry that can hinder diversity within it. The social perception of male dominance perpetuates within ideas of workplaces and towards forestry education, stemming back from high school to post-secondary pathways that exist within the secondary education system. Misconceptions of forestry being a masculine industry with specific gender roles within positions within the industry can also hinder the potential for diversity in this industry. However, this may not be the case in all terms of perception, as we are in the early stages of diversifying candidates, which is evidenced through university and media programming that is attracting and welcoming new talent into the forestry industry. Specifically, the representation of women is critical within the forestry industry. Less than 20% of the workforce is currently represented by women. Women are currently in forestry, but still experiencing firsts as women in the field. Social perceptions that women are not expected to be in the industry can hinder new talent and attract diverse candidates. This infographic depicts the dire need for increased women representation within the forestry industry. With women having a small representation at the executive level, there can be damaging impacts on the potential hiring and retention of women within the forestry industry. To address potential changes, it is critical to address the current factors hindering diversity, equity, and inclusion. Predominantly, perception plays a role as a hindering factor, as the industry perception is that there is male dominance with a lack of female representation in all positions, as evidenced in the previous infographs. As well, stereotypical expectations of behaviors, roles, and responsibilities can deter potential applicants. Moreover, stereotypical images of the forestry industry, including people in the woods cutting down trees, the lumberjack stereotype, holding a chainsaw, fighting fires, warehouse workers, or cruising plots, can create an image that is deterrent to diverse candidates. As evidenced through a basic Google search, the forestry industry portrays a very homogeneous view of who works within the industry and what the role entails. With the transformation of the industry to include diverse positions and candidates, it is critical to parallel these changes within media and materials meant to attract new, diverse candidates. The perception of the industry can also be hindering in relation to the location and requirements of the positions within the industry. Remote work brings disadvantages of harassment and violence risk for women who would choose to leave their communities to join industries in remote locations. The physical requirements have the potential to reflect masculinity, which can be deterrent as an overarching expectation for positions within the industry. Further, the social perception is that women are not seen as competent in the industry, questioning their belonging prior to direct exposure to the industry or involvement within the industry. The present legacy of the forestry industry also has hindering effects on potential diversity of candidates, as outdated ideologies outweigh progressive and innovative methods. Men and organizations who are not interested in diversity and have never experienced discrimination or microaggressions can contribute to this legacy of a homogeneous ideology that is oppressive and discriminatory towards diverse candidates. Credit is not given to women or minority groups that have overcome hurdles to get where they are, being given the same expectation for a traditional or typical candidate when considering the expectations or experience required. Similar to perception and legacy, social influence affects perceptions and a potential for diverse candidacy within the forestry industry. Family either experiences or knows firsthand or has outdated ideologies of the forestry industry, affecting the perceptions of a potential candidate. People within the industry know and must share with people that are interested to draw attention to the industry and its potentials. As well, a limited understanding of the diversity of the industry and positions within it in terms of opportunities of career paths can limit the perception of the industry and the potential for a role within it. The final hindering factor is motivation. Interactive experiences, including experience in a camp activity, can draw interest of potential candidates. Role models can also increase exposure and draw attention to different aspects of the industry that would otherwise go unknown. Further, real-time interactions and responses to questions beyond career-specific workshops and programming can increase diverse candidate attraction and retention. Now that we've addressed the potential hindering factors towards attraction and retention of diverse candidates, let's talk about the transformative practices to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion within the forestry industry and within your organization. To effectively grow and change as an industry, there must be intentional efforts to move toward a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace, statistically, and at the root of workplace culture. Additionally, change within protocols, policies, and practice can create an inclusive and diverse workplace. Altering representation in the workplace, media, and acknowledgement is also significant, showing the diversity and acknowledging the diversity, creating that truly inclusive setting. Further, continued learning, training, and awareness is critical for both employees and those who are in upper C-suite management, ensuring that these major changes create a transformative practice that is welcoming, attends to diversity, offers inclusive practices, and addresses equity within the workplace. Transformative practice can also be evidenced through the opportunities for diverse candidates, representation in leadership, and identification of current demographics within C-suite and all upper-level positions can draw attention to the current diversity within a workplace or an organization. Opportunities for promotion and the expectation that minority groups will be given consideration to take on exponentially advanced roles is also a critical consideration, developing the career path for potential candidates. More so, perception is critical. Perception of potential through understanding of the diversity and growth within the industry and the role that minority groups can and will take on within these new pathways can create diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplaces that offer and respect and value the diversity within them. In response to the potential negative perception that some have of the forestry industry, transformative practice that addresses anti-sexism is key. Increased representation of women within the industry is a cyclical process. The more representation of women, the more women are attracted to the industry, increasing exponentially the representation of women. Increased attention to the potential for women to advance into leadership positions also draws new candidates, as they see the potential career path that they have within an organization or a field. Clarify that women are not just tokens and that they bring value to the company. Drawing on the diversity definition, we move from the statistical representation of women to inclusion and showing how women are valued within organizations. And finally, movement away from the industry stereotype that it is male-dominated, sexist, and an old-fashioned industry, and towards a innovative and diverse workplace that has a thriving culture for success. The creation of relationships within an organization can create meaningful interactions that will prove successful in long-term company success. Offering a mentorship to potential candidates can create a deep connection that otherwise would not be developed. Generating personal connections to women within the organization will allow women to see their potential within the organization. Implementing relationships with women in the industry early on, during education and recruiting, by keeping women connected to other women within the potential field, then there is an increased potential for attraction and retention for organizations. And also, providing role models with specification within the industry. Drawing attention to the different streams within the industry can truly create strong and powerful relationships that will create long-term success. Externally, the organization must also draw attention to publication and marketing, and the image that is portrayed of their company and the industry itself. Portraying more positive aspects of the sector can increase the perception of the public. Inclusion of more than just the traditional forestry industry by focusing on the human dimensions and conversations can open up the candidate pool for increasing and attracting new diverse potential candidates. Connecting to global issues can increase the opportunity for potential candidates to connect the industry to their other interests and goals. And finally, reaching talent through social media and drawing upon the modern interactions of potential candidates. While it may be unnerving to know that all of these potential changes must occur, these are not all immediate actions. While in fact, transformative practice is a long-term action and requires long-term goals. Implementation of diversity policies and targets can ensure long-term development of organizational culture and retention of employees that are of diverse demographics. Attention to the creation and maintenance of an inclusive culture is an ongoing process that requires constant attention. And lastly, the monitoring of progress through formative and summative assessment and benchmarking to ensure that progress is being made and is continuing within the organization and the industry. For leadership, it is important to include diversity models and training, ensuring that everyone within an organization has the same level of knowledge and awareness. Additionally, diversity goes beyond the inclusion of women, including race, sexuality, age, and many other aspects of intersectionality. As well, increased implementation of inclusion practices must occur to parallel the diversity numbers. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a constant process that requires attention and revisiting and reflecting on action through long-term and continuous cycles. While you are working towards long-term goals, immediate transformative practice can occur through publication and marketing. Direct more stories toward people and the human connection within the industry. Increase representation of successful women within the industry, and provide a greater focus towards showing that the industry is not impenetrable. Together, all of these will begin a critical conversation about diversity within the industry and your organization. While all of these changes seem desirable, it can be challenging for an organization to make these changes and support progressive change. The forestry industry is becoming more competitive, requiring organizations to increase their competitive edge. As of now, that competitive edge is the creation of a workplace that welcomes, recognizes, and values women. Take a moment to consider your organization through the following assessment. Can you answer yes to the following questions? Does everyone in your organization have a sense of belonging? Is everyone in your organization physically and mentally safe? Are those in leadership roles overtly expressing empathy? Have you deconstructed the top-down approach? Do you embrace diversity in various aspects of corporate culture and action rather than simply quantifying it? Does your training include consistent attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion? Are hiring practices focused on finding a candidate who can thrive rather than someone who fits? Does your organization actively communicate and contribute to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives internally and externally? As you consider whether you could answer yes to these questions, or perhaps you weren't aware of the answer to these questions, think deeper about the diversity, equity, and inclusion approaches within your organization and the necessity for change. In consideration of what we've learned together today, draw attention to the actionable takeaways and be progressive. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are not synonyms. Management, executive, and C-suite participation is critical. An inclusive diversity, equity, and inclusion board within the organization supports ongoing growth that supports corporate culture. Diversity encompasses an unending range of identification categories, and ask for help, including investors, partners, stakeholders, and beyond, for support in change and resources. Thank you for taking the time to learn with me today. I appreciate you opening your mind to the opportunities that can thrive from diversity, equity, and inclusion within your organization and the forestry industry. Please reach out and discuss your organization's current and future efforts with us. We look forward to growing with you together.